Communication Theory by Niklas Luhmann, Understanding How Society Connects. Niklas Luhmann's communication theory offers a fascinating and unique way to look at communication and society. Luhmann, a German sociologist, focused on how communication shapes society and how society functions as a network of communication processes. His approach was different from the traditional idea of communication as simply an exchange of information between people. Instead, Luhmann proposed that communication itself is the basis of society, and it is much more complex than just sender, message, receiver. At the core of Luhmann's theory is the idea that society is not made up of individuals interacting directly with each other, but is instead made up of communication events. In his view, these events create and sustain the social world. Communication is not just one person talking to another. It is a self-contained process where society is built through many layers of meaning. To understand his theory, it helps to grasp a few key concepts he introduces: systems, meaning, and the autopoiesis of communication. One of the first ideas Luhmann introduces is the concept of systems. In this theory, systems are parts of society that work with their own logic, like the economy, politics, and even our personal relationships. Luhmann views each of these as separate systems, and they do not directly interact with each other but instead work through the continuous process of communication. So, for example, if someone from the business world talks to a politician, they are still speaking from within their system. The language of business for one, the language of politics for the other. The communication between them requires translating these two types of meaning so that both sides can understand each other. This unique perspective helps explain why misunderstandings can happen between different parts of society. Each system has its way of creating and understanding information. Luhmann explains that for communication to work, each person or system must create meaning. Meaning is not something that exists naturally but is something created through how we interpret things. For instance, when we hear a sentence, the words alone do not create meaning. Our interpretation of these words is what brings meaning. Luhmann believed that every system has its meaning-making process, and that communication is the way these systems work together. This means that each system uses communication to build, reinforce, or sometimes even break down the boundaries of meaning that separate it from others. In Luhmann's view, communication is what he calls autopoietic, a term borrowed from biology. Autopoiesis refers to a process that is self-creating and self-maintaining. For example, a living cell maintains itself by taking in nutrients and expelling waste, constantly working to keep itself going. Luhmann uses this idea to explain how communication works in society. According to him, communication is self-sustaining. It does not rely on individuals to keep it alive but rather has its own process. People participate in communication, but the communication continues on its own, growing and evolving through society. Luhmann argues that communication happens in three parts: information, utterance, and understanding. First, information is what is being said or shared, like a piece of news. Second, the utterance is the form or way it is said. This could be tone of voice, choice of words, or context. Lastly, understanding is how the other person interprets what is said. Only when these three parts come together does communication happen, creating a cycle that feeds back into society. So, when someone speaks, they are not just passing on information, they are also offering a way to interpret that information, and the listener then has to decide if they understand it, accept it, or maybe interpret it differently. This cycle continues, and as it does, it creates what Luhmann calls a social reality. Society, in his view, is not just a collection of people, but a collection of communication events that build and reinforce our sense of reality. Now, you might wonder, if communication keeps happening, how does it change society? Luhmann's answer is that communication is also selective. Not every message or piece of information becomes part of our social reality. Society chooses which parts of communication to keep and which to ignore. This selective process means that only certain ideas, beliefs, and information survive and become widely accepted. Over time, these surviving pieces of communication shape society's values, norms, and institutions. This explains why some ideas become popular while others fade away. Communication itself determines what stays and what goes. In Luhmann's theory, power is also part of communication. Power is not something an individual possesses but is a product of how messages and meanings are received and accepted by society. For example, if a political leader says something that society accepts as important, their words hold power not because of their title alone but because of how communication reinforces their authority. Society gives meaning to their words, creating a feedback loop where their power grows with each accepted message. In this way, Luhmann shows that communication does not just transfer information, it builds authority, creates influence, and determines who or what is important in society. Luhmann's approach also explains social conflict. Conflict happens when different systems clash because they have different interpretations and methods of communication. In today's world, think about the clash between environmental activists and large corporations. Each has its communication style, goals, and systems of meaning. When they communicate, misunderstandings are common because each system interprets reality differently. According to Luhmann, these conflicts are not only inevitable but also necessary. They push society to evolve by forcing it to reevaluate which messages are accepted or rejected, ultimately shaping how society responds to these challenges. Another significant aspect of Luhmann's theory is the idea of risk in communication. Not all communication is successful, misunderstandings and distortions are common. However, these risks are also what drive communication forward. When we communicate, we take a chance that our message may not be understood as intended, but each successful interaction builds trust and understanding. In the broader picture, the risk in communication is what keeps society dynamic and adaptable, allowing it to handle new situations and integrate new ideas over time. Luhmann's theory, though complex, has a lot to offer us today. With the rise of social media, digital communication, and global interaction, understanding how communication works on a societal level is more relevant than ever. His theory shows that society is not fixed, it is a living, changing network created through continuous communication. It also suggests that everyone participates in building this reality, whether intentionally or not. Even a single message online, shared and reshared, can become part of this communication cycle, impacting society as a whole. This theory encourages us to look beyond individual conversations and see how they form patterns and structures that shape our lives. Every time we speak, post, or share, we are part of this grand network of meaning-making. Through understanding this, we realize that communication is much more than just words. It is the foundation of how society exists, grows, and changes. Niklas Luhmann's communication theory offers a profound perspective on the role of communication in our lives. It teaches us that society is not merely a collection of individuals but a continuous flow of messages that shape our beliefs, values, and identities. When we communicate, we are not just passing information, we are actively building the world we live in. This theory invites us to be mindful of our messages and the meanings we create. Whether we are aware of it or not, every piece of communication is a thread in the fabric of society. If you found this discussion helpful and want to explore more ideas like this, please like this video and subscribe to our channel.